us, et cetera, et cetera. We don't need their oil and gas. We have more than anybody. I say you can always become a state. And if you're a state, we won't have a deficit. We won't have to tariff you, et cetera, et cetera. But
Trump just slapped a 25% tariff on Canada, and now they're threatening to cut off 60% of America's oil supply. That's right, the guy who can't stop talking about how great gas prices were when he was president might just triple them with his own dumb trade war. The famously polite Canadians are now saying sorry, not sorry, as they prepare a knockout punch to America's economy. And honestly, who knew maple syrup land had this much fight in them? Turns out when you mess with people's livelihoods, even the nice guys up north will show their teeth. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great, thank you so much. Now, back to the video. You know what's truly remarkable? Our neighbor to the north, Canada, land of maple syrup, hockey, and saying sorry even when you bump into them, is about to teach Trump a lesson in economic warfare that'll make his head spin faster than a hockey puck. And the best part? He started it. So picture this. Trump, in all his infinite wisdom, decides to slap a massive 25% tariff on Canadian goods. Why? Well, he claims it's to protect American industries and stop drug smuggling.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau gave an incredible speech yesterday when Donald Trump caved.
our military is at their disposal. All of these other things, they should be a state. That's why I told Trudeau when he came down.
Standing up to Trump, and he talks about how proud he is to stand with all Canadians at this time.
Right? Because Canada is clearly the drug cartel capital of the world. Those dangerous Canadians with their universal healthcare and politeness. They're clearly the biggest threat to America. What Trump apparently forgot is that Canada isn't some pushover country that'll just take his nonsense lying down.
The people of the great nation of Canada were prepared, they were pissed, and they were ready to retaliate.
And make it a 51st U.S. state, threatening to use what he calls economic force to make that happen.
Donald Trump blinked, Donald Trump caved, Donald Trump temporarily withdrew the tariffs.
They immediately hit back with dollar-for-dollar retaliatory tariffs totaling $30 billion on American goods. Everything from fruit juice to cosmetics got caught in the crossfire. Turns out those nice Canadians can throw a pretty mean economic punch when provoked. And then, in what might be the most ridiculous suggestion of this entire fiasco,
tariff strategy of the administration for the whole world. We had been talking to them quite a bit already. Really believe that Canada-U.S. trade will help the president, in fact, achieve his economic goals. But really on just Canada-U.S. things, and there they really talked to us about how they plan to have it affect the whole world.
Trump's economic advisor, Howard Lutnick, had the brilliant idea that Canada should just become the 51st state to avoid these tariffs. I mean, why didn't anyone think of that before? Hey, Canada, you know your centuries of national identity and sovereignty. Just throw that away so Trump doesn't have to admit he made a mistake. Canada's response was essentially a polite version of thanks but no thanks. Probably the most Canadian way possible to tell someone to shove it.
I've made sure that every single day in this office, I put Canadians first, that I have people's backs.
I'm also considering military force to annex and acquire Canada.
No, economic force.
And that's why I'm here to tell you all that we got you.
But here's where things get particularly interesting for our friends up in Alaska. British Columbia isn't just sitting back and taking it. They're introducing legislation that would charge American commercial trucks driving to Alaska through their province. This is basically holding Alaska hostage in this ridiculous trade war. Why does this matter so much? Well, the Alaska highway stretches about 2,450 kilometers, and it's absolutely crucial for connecting Alaska to the rest of the United States. A whopping 80% of goods transported to Alaska have to pass through Canadian territory. So when Trump decided to pick this fight, he essentially threw Alaska under the bus, or should I say, under the truck.
The great nation of Canada smacked down Donald Trump. Canada did not bend. Canada did not break.
Trade war with our biggest trading partner. U.S. President-elect Donald Trump is doubling down on his so-called joke to annex Canada.
When Donald Trump imposed devastating 25% across across the board tariffs against Canada.
If these measures go through, Alaskans are going to see prices skyrocket for practically everything. Fresh vegetables, meat, electronics, all the essentials will suddenly cost a fortune because shipping companies will have no choice but to pass these new costs onto consumers. And let's not forget about Alaska's tourism industry. Many cruise ships are required to make stops at Canadian ports before continuing their journey to Alaska due to maritime regulations. If Canada decides to make this more difficult or expensive, Alaska's tourism economy could take a massive hit, all because Trump wanted to flex his tariff muscles. But here's the real kicker: Canada's nuclear option. They're actually threatening to.
I say you can always become a state. And if you're a state, we won't have a deficit. We won't have to tariff you, et cetera, et cetera. But we don't need them to make our cars, and they make a lot of them. We don't need their lumber because we have our own forests.
Cut off oil exports to America. And before you think, so what? We've got oil. Consider this bombshell. U.S. refineries are specifically designed to process Canadian heavy crude oil. They literally built the infrastructure around Canadian oil. Experts warn that if Canada follows through on this threat, gas prices wouldn't just increase, they'd absolutely explode overnight. Why? Because you can't just flip a switch and have refineries process completely different types of oil. Switching to oil from other regions would be incredibly costly and time-consuming. The impact would be immediate and severe, with gas prices potentially surging to levels we haven't seen before. Supply chains would face significant disruptions across various industries.
Canada has been very tough to deal with over the years, and it's not fair that we should have a $200 billion or $250 billion deficit, et cetera, et cetera. We don't need their oil and gas. We have more than anybody.
And here's the delicious irony in all of this. Trump, the guy who never shuts up about how low gas prices were during his presidency, might single-handedly cause them to triple because he couldn't resist starting a trade war with literally the nicest country on earth. So here we are.
Even in the very last days of this government, we will not let Canadians down. Today, such a time as the unjustified American tariffs on Canadian goods are lifted.
The guy who couldn't stop tweeting gas prices are the lowest they've been in years is about to turn Americans into involuntary Tesla owners because he picked a fight with the wrong neighbor. Talk about shooting yourself in the foot, or in this case, the gas tank.
U.S. administration, but as I've said a number of times, we will not be backing down from our response tariffs.
Talks about how Canadians will still not be backing down at all, not now, not ever.
The beautiful irony here is that Trump decided to mess with Canada of all countries. You know, the place where people apologize when you step on their foot. And now these polite maple syrup enthusiasts are about to economically body slam the United States harder than a WWE finale. Honestly, we better start practicing our most sincere sorry right now, or we'll all be riding moose to work by next Tuesday. Maybe we could borrow some Canadian politeness and ask nicely if they'd accept a slightly used president as payment instead. Just a thought.